take up short duration discussion, that is on the situation in Nepal and the state of Indo-Nepal relations. You know, we had started a calling attention, and yesterday it was decided that calling attention will be converted into short duration discussion. The time allotted for this short duration discussion, as you know, according to the rule, is 2 hours and 30 minutes. So everybody is requested to adhere to the time allotted to the party. Mr. Pavan Varma, he has given the notice and he is to move the discussion. Please start.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Chairman. I rise to initiate the discussion on the situation in Nepal and Indo-Nepal relations. Sir, I raise this subject with some anguish and some concern. And I want to say right in the beginning that foreign policy is a matter of consensus, and I, through you, approach the External Affairs Minister not with political acrimony or a sense of partisan divide, but because this is a national issue of considerable importance which deserves the fullest attention not only of the government but of the nation as a whole. Sir, let me begin by saying that our relations with Nepal today are in a crisis. In fact, I would go so far as to say that there perhaps has never been a phase where our relationships have been worse. There's an acute shortage, sir, as I had mentioned earlier in that aborted calling attention motion. There is an acute shortage of fuel, of cooking gas, of essential medicines and food items. The anti-India sentiment in Nepal is growing. I had mentioned earlier that even Indian TV channels, I'm told, which are extremely popular in Nepal, have been taken off the air. There is great apprehension of the role of China in this situation, and I have read commentaries which say that we are close to handing over Nepal to China on a platter. And above all, sir, the people in Nepal, the Madhesis, are being killed, and their legitimate demands are being thwarted, demands relating to geographical demarcation of constituencies, of citizenship, of representation on the basis of population, of the status of their language and culture, and of their representation in the services, in the police, the army, and the bureaucracy. So I concede in the beginning itself that the matter is complex. First and foremost, sir, we are dealing with a sovereign country, and we must treat it as such. But at the same time, we do have legitimate interests. We have a long, almost 1,800-kilometer porous border with Nepal, which straddles 5 states, 5 of our states. We have what is called Roti Beti Ka Rishta. We have the great problem of persuasively intervening in a sovereign country so that that country writes a sustainable, inclusive, fair, equitable constitution which gives due representation to all its people. I concede, therefore, sir, that it is a complex issue. My first question on this subject, and as I said, I raise it with anguish and concern. What has been the quality, sir, of our efforts and the role of our diplomacy? Let me, sir, take you through quickly. In August 2014, our Prime Minister had a successful bilateral visit. And during that visit, he said in a statesman-like tone, Rishi man se Samvidhan ko banaiye. Later, sir, he visited Nepal again in the context of the SAARC summit. And in the bilateral leg of that meeting, once again, he set the right tone by saying, Sehmati banaiye, pahadiyon mein, madeshiyon mein, maovadiyon mein, sare janata. It was good, sage, statesmanly advice. But my question, sir, is, what happened subsequently and what was the follow-up. And I begin on this, sir, by what actually transpired during the devastating earthquake in Nepal in April 2014. Sir, India responded promptly. But somewhere in the sheer magnitude of our response, and I say this in the context of how India should handle its relationship with all its neighbors, a large country dealing with smaller neighbors, somewhere in the magnitude of our response, the weakness that has been seen in this government, and I don't want to get into acrimony on this, for projection, promotion, publicity, overwhelmed the sense of empathy and sympathy and even gratitude of the people of Nepal. And India was seen as a big brother, overly concerned for the safety of its own citizens, in a sense of well-intentioned bull in a china shop with fragments in that country lying all over due to the wrath of nature. An opportunity to build bridges at a crucial time, I believe, which should have come to us as a dividend of our response, was squandered. And in this context, sir, and I say this again, from my own experience in diplomacy, there is an old Chinese saying, "Why do you hate me? I have not helped you." And that really kicks in when you deal as a big neighbor with a small neighbor. Now, after that, sir, the Honorable External Affairs Minister, for whose personal competence, eloquence, and experience I have the greatest respect, in her statement on the other day said that we actively facilitated the process towards an acceptable constitution. Now, I want to ask, sir, through you, I will refer to three events. In June 2015, the Honorable External Affairs Minister visited Nepal, I believe during the International Donors Conference. There was a gap then of more than 2 months, and then we are told that there was a telephonic conversation between our Prime Minister and the Prime Minister of Nepal. At a very crucial phase, sir. At a crucial phase when that very constitution which has become the bone of contention and the cause of instability in our most strategic neighborhood was being developed, these are the two overt forms of interaction at the level where it matters. And then, sir, on September 18th, 2015, our Foreign Secretary goes as a special envoy of the Prime Minister at a time when the Constitution has already been adopted and is 2 days away from promulgation. Now, I ask you, sir, knowing the criticality of the exercise, was this the only investment required of our diplomatic establishment and political leadership? What were we doing between June 15th and August 25? And I will be told that our very capable ambassador was in touch and there were other channels. But I am saying that in terms of sustained, persuasive diplomacy, what were we doing? And I also want to ask the question, and this is not to cast any aspersion on an exceptionally capable officer who was also my colleague, was the visit of Foreign Secretaries as a special envoy, after the Constitution has been adopted and 2 days before its promulgation, the best that we could think of in terms of having the kind of persuasive impact at a critical phase when the Constitution was being finalized. These are questions, sir, we need to put before us so that we don't repeat the same mistakes again. I am aware there have been recent developments, and I am hopeful that we may find a solution. And we trust the government to find it. But if we are to pursue the search for those solutions based on the manner, in my view, that we have acted in the past, we may not succeed, with extremely deleterious consequences to follow. Fourthly, sir, the Prime Minister's announced policy is neighborhood first. And I want to ask that if that is his policy, did the Prime Minister himself, on a matter of such importance, invest sufficient energy in trying to see that the impasse that currently exists did not happen? So during the same period, let us take from June to September when the Constitution was at a final phase. In July, sir, I am not questioning his priorities. Prime Minister goes abroad as a representative of the whole nation. But in July, sir, he was visiting 5 Central Asian nations and Russia. In August, he was in the United Arab Emirates. In September, he was in Ireland and the USA. As I said, some of these visits must be important. But so was the crisis that was unfolding in the critically neighboring space of Nepal. And since foreign policy, sir, and I again say this with respect, given the Prime Minister's activism, there is a reasonable inference to withdraw that all initiatives in foreign policy does stem from his table. And if the Prime Minister's eye is off the ball himself, whether this has led perhaps to the kind of policy paralysis that to my mind seems to have gripped us in dealing with Nepal at a critical moment of time. Sixthly, sir, was there at this time any thought given to putting together an all-party delegation to interact with the Nepalese leadership? So you are aware that many of our political leaders, cutting across party lines, have excellent relations with leaders of Nepal. Was any thought given to put together such a delegation in order to reinforce our efforts, in our interaction, persuasive interaction with Nepal? I know the Honorable EAM has said, asked us now at this stage that if we suggested she will follow suit. But I want to ask, why was this initiative not taken? I will go further, sir. I will ask, why was there due processes of consultation with political leaderships across party lines? After all, this is not merely an issue of one party or only of the government. There is a democracy, there are political leaderships, there could have been wider consultations. Seventhly, sir, I say this and I'm subject to correction. But there are reports that even within the foreign policy establishment, there were differences of opinion which in a sense prevented the emergence of a coherent strategic policy to Nepal between, for instance, our embassy and the Foreign Office. And I'm sure if they were there, they needed to be reconciled. They needed to be reconciled so that one cohesive message goes. And I'm sure the External Affairs Minister herself may either say I'm wrong or acknowledge or take cognizance of this fact. Then, sir, there is another issue. And then I again raise it not in order to ruffle feathers. I say that there is a Foreign Office. There is the Ministry of External Affairs, and there is a designated External Affairs Minister. Can we have parallel establishments which are liaising with Nepal at this time with the knowledge and perhaps the encouragement of the government? And I am referring to organizations which are associated with the ruling party today. People say that particular individuals in that organization are in fact as powerful as the Ministry of External Affairs and have an entirely independent set of negotiations going on with Nepal, including on the question of the Hindu Rashtra nature of Nepal. I want to flag this point because we are in a situation of an impasse and we are facing a crisis. So these are issues which need to be flagged and which need to be avoided as we proceed in the future. And also, sir, I want to raise this question. I hope I'm wrong, sir, but there should be no role of domestic politics on a matter of national consensus, which is foreign policy. We were in the Bihar elections and we were told that for some time, the crisis that was looming in Bihar was allowed to drift in order perhaps to derive short-term political dividends in an adjoining state which shares a common boundary with Nepal. I am not saying that this would have happened. I am saying it on the basis of reliable evidence that we had. And I believe, again, this is a matter where we are playing with fire. Nepal is an important issue and should have deserved the attention that it deserves. My ninth question, sir, is, were we wise? Were we wise, sir, in internationalizing the problem by criticizing Nepal at the UN, at the Human Rights Council, and including critical references to Nepal in joint statements with the Maldives and the UK? It's a bilateral relationship. It has always been. We do not need third-party mediation in our relations with Nepal. We will deal with Nepal as we have always dealt, as best as we can, because of the time-tested historical, political, cultural relationships we have had with that country. Was there a sense of ad hocism in this? Had we thought this policy through? What were our goals by doing this? I believe these are questions that we need to ask. And then, sir, another question arises. And I refer to the role of China. I mean, when we allow our relations with Nepal to reach this point, there is going to be interference, as we have seen in some of our other neighboring countries. There is going to, and we are aware that China is attempting to penetrate the Himalayas with its Western development campaign, which seeks to link Tibet Railway with Kathmandu, and for which an agreement has already been signed in 2014. Now, with that kind of a presence, and I would say further, sir, Bhutan is watching. I was ambassador in Bhutan, sir, earlier. Bhutan is a landlocked country. Neighbors are watching what happens in a situation where if there is an internal crisis in that country and India in some way is a participant on one side or the other, or even as a mediator, what can be the consequences on that country in terms of essential supplies and other means of strategic support? This is a question which other countries are watching. I can say to you clearly that even one of our most friendly neighbors, Bhutan, is watching. So, sir, in short, I want to make the point that keeping all factors in mind, were we during this critical period up to when this crisis has unfolded, were we sending a coherent, sensible, diplomatically sustained and persuasive message to the Nepalese leadership? This is a question the nation wants to know. It is asked in a constructive spirit in order that we may not make the same mistakes in the past and proceed to find a solution to this crisis. Were we fully utilizing the instruments of diplomacy to interact effectively with the government of Nepal, and doing so when there was still time to make our intervention effective and impactful? And if we were, and this is again a question of great importance, sir, if we were, why were our interventions not having the desired effect? Where have we gone wrong? That is the question, sir, before I conclude, sir, I want to make a point. Whatever the situation, and I want to reiterate that we need to find a solution while fully conscious of the legitimate right of the Madheshis, because not only in terms of equity, but because we share a long and strategically important porous border with many countries in our neighborhood, most significantly with Nepal, and any instability or unrest or disquiet in the region impacts on us. So my question, sir, is that while keeping this factor in mind, how do we proceed ahead? What are the building blocks of this relationship which the government is planning to consider in terms of the resolution of what is an internal problem of Nepal, but in which we have an important stake? And I want to reiterate, sir, for record, something important. We are dealing with a sovereign country. Our role should be that of a friendly but effective mediator, not a big brotherly intruder in the internal affairs of Nepal. This is important for posterity and for putting our relations with Nepal on a foundation which ensure greater strength and amity in the decades to come. Can the Nepalese government be persuaded now? I believe the Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister were here. I had the occasion to meet him as well. There have been the Madhesh leaders also in India. Can the Nepalese government be persuaded at this stage to sustain diplomatic pressure and other interactions of which I mentioned, to now move the two constitutional amendments in a manner that a beginning in talks can be made? Can we in some way encourage a dialogue between the Madhesi people and the Nepalese government? And can we do this in a sustained, enlightened, carefully planned and calibrated manner? These are the questions before us, sir. But I want to add this point, sir. Sir, winter is coming, sir. There is a humanitarian crisis also on. There is an acute shortage of every form of essential goods, and I referred to it in the beginning. Let me say to you that UNICEF has warned that 3 million children under the age of 5 now face the risk of death or disease in winter. I'm not going into the fact who is responsible. I know the Nepalese leadership thinks the blockade is on our side, and we say that the stoppage of essential supplies is because of the protests of the Madheshi people. But the fact of the matter, sir, is that if with winter coming we do not put an end to the completely unstable situation of shortage of goods in Nepal, we will be creating a bedrock in an important section of the Nepalese leadership which will remain for generations to be anti-Indian, sir. Whatever the problem, sir, we cannot penalize the people. We cannot penalize the people of Nepal, and our intervention, sir, must be, as the Honorable External Affairs Minister herself said, our intervention must be for a peaceful, stable and democratic, united Nepal. How we do that, sir, requires wisdom, and I want to end by saying, we have faith in the government in achieving this, but I would expect that effort to be broad-based, and I would expect that effort not to repeat in what my view is have been genuine mistakes with the eye of the ball in the recent past leading to this crisis. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Varma ji, succinctly presented.